Get him out. Now. The command cracked through the marble lobby like a whip. Two uniformed officers closed in, each hand gripping the arms of a man who hadn't spoken a word yet. He stood tall, jacket zipped, eyes steady, refusing to bend even as the cuffs bit at his wrists. Around him, the air was no longer soft with chandeliers and piano music. It had turned jagged, like the room itself had chosen sides. Behind the polished counter, the hotel manager folded her arms across a tailored suit. Her smirk was bright, rehearsed, almost theatrical. "You have 20 minutes before he's gone," she told the officers, as if the verdict had already been signed. A junior clerk beside her lifted a phone, filming the moment with trembling hands. Another employee whispered under her breath, "That's right, get him out." But the man in the center, the one being dragged as if he were a trespasser, didn't flinch. His silence wasn't surrender. It was weight. It was memory. He had seen this scene before, in different rooms, under different ceilings, wearing different clothes, and each time, the script was the same: suspicion, humiliation, expulsion. This time, though, the stage was different. This was his own hotel. Guests froze in mid-step. A woman in heels stopped rolling her suitcase and clutched the handle tighter. A businessman lowered his phone, whispering, "What's going on?" The grand lobby, all gold trim and glass, felt less like a place of welcome and more like a tribunal. The manager leaned forward, voice raised for the crowd to hear. "Room service isn't for people like him. He's abusing our property." The words landed heavy, louder than the clatter of dishes or the shuffle of bags. The officers nodded without question, moving him toward the doors as if justice were theirs to deliver. He inhaled slowly, chest rising once, then falling. Not in panic, not in fear, but in calculation. Every insult, every sneer, every assumption, they weren't wounds, they were timestamps. Evidence. The lobby hummed with unease. A teenager near the velvet couches raised his phone higher, muttering, "This doesn't look right." A mother pulled her child close, whispering, "Don't stare." And somewhere near the elevator, a guest shook his head. "I've stayed here 10 years, never seen anything like this." The man finally spoke. His voice didn't crack or climb, it simply landed, deep and deliberate. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now back to him." His eyes shifted to the manager. The officers still held his arms, but in that instant, it felt like the grip had reversed. Like they were the ones being tested. Because he wasn't just another guest. And this wasn't just another night. Hours earlier, no one noticed him when he stepped through the revolving glass doors, and that was the point. He wasn't dressed in silk or tailored navy, just a brown leather jacket, black jeans, plain sneakers, no entourage, no glossy car waiting out front. He carried nothing more than a slim phone in one hand and a folded receipt in the other. To the guests sipping champagne in the lounge, he could have been anyone, a traveler checking in late, a man between meetings, a face that didn't belong to the marble and chandeliers. That invisibility was deliberate, because he had come not just to rest, he had come to test. For months, rumors reached his desk, stories of how certain guests were treated differently in his hotels. Stories about raised eyebrows at the front desk, cold silences in the restaurant, or doors that seemed to close faster for people who looked like him. He needed to see it with his own eyes. So tonight, the CEO of a global hospitality empire walked in as if he were no one. No badge of power, no name drop, just another man requesting something as ordinary as dinner delivered to his room. At the counter, he had spoken with quiet courtesy. "Room service. Carter, Suite 1702. The young clerk looked him over once, lips pressed thin, and disappeared into the back without answering. A minute later, the manager arrived. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "What's your name again?" she asked, voice clipped. "Carter," he repeated evenly. The manager tapped on her screen, frowning like she'd discovered a glitch. "Strange," she muttered just loud enough. "I don't see authorization for you here." Of course she did. His reservation had been confirmed under the highest tier executive override, owner clearance. But she wasn't looking for data, she was looking for an excuse. When he offered his card, she took it with 2 fingers, as though the metal itself might stain her. She whispered to the clerk, "Flag this. Security if necessary." He didn't argue. He only watched, calm as stone. That calm wasn't new. He had practiced it years ago, when he was 25, and denied entry to a conference hotel because his suit didn't fit the image of a keynote guest. He had felt the sting then, but he had also felt resolve. And now, decades later, standing in the lobby of a chain he owned, he wore the same calm-like armor. To everyone else, he was just a man waiting for food that never came. But beneath the surface, he was measuring, documenting, letting the silence record the room better than any camera could. What they didn't know, and what would soon collapse around them, was that every slight glance, every whisper, every refusal was already echoing higher than this lobby, straight to a boardroom where his word was final. And when the reckoning came, no one here would be able to claim they hadn't been warned. The first comment was soft enough to pretend it wasn't meant for him. "Room service isn't for people like that," the junior clerk muttered, eyes fixed on the monitor but voice loud enough for the lobby to hear. A couple standing near the elevator glanced over, brows furrowed. The words didn't sound like policy. They sounded like a warning wrapped in disdain. The manager didn't correct her staff. She leaned closer to the counter, gaze sweeping him from sneakers to collar, as though cataloging every reason he didn't belong. "Sir, perhaps you're confused. Our premium services are reserved for verified guests." "I am verified," he answered simply. Her laugh was short, sharp, echoing off marble. "Not in my system, you're not." Another clerk joined, emboldened now. "We've seen it before. People flash cards they can't afford, names they can't prove, sometimes stolen." His smirk carried more weight than his words. A ripple passed through the room, conversations quieted, glasses stilled on tabletops. Guests were listening now. The man at the center didn't raise his voice. "Check again." But the manager shook her head, already waving at the security desk. "We're not wasting time on this. Escort him out before this turns into a scene." And with that, the two officers moved in. Hands gripped his arms firmly, unnecessarily. He didn't resist. He stood as if anchored to the floor itself, steady, unflinching. The clink of metal cuffs echoed louder than the fountain in the lobby. "You see?" the manager declared, turning to the watching crowd. "Policy. We can't risk fraud in this establishment." Her tone was triumphant, but the room was unsettled. A teenager near the couches whispered, "Fraud. He just asked for food." A woman with a stroller frowned. Why would they treat him like this? The officers began steering him toward the door. And yet, his expression hadn't shifted. No fear, no protest. Just that same steady silence, the kind that makes others nervous because it feels less like surrender and more like judgment. The manager pressed on, desperate to claim the narrative. "People like him think they can walk in, demand service, and we're supposed to bow?" She let the words ring across the lobby, hoping volume could mask prejudice. But volume couldn't drown unease. A young bellhop near the luggage carts muttered, "That's not right." He didn't raise his voice, but he didn't need to. The words slipped into the current of tension already sweeping the room. The man being escorted inhaled once, slow and deliberate, as if counting the seconds. He had given them every chance to choose dignity. Instead, they had chosen exposure. And exposure was exactly what was coming. The cuffs clicked tighter, but he didn't flinch. The lobby buzzed with whispers, phones half raised, eyes darting between the officers and the man who refused to struggle. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't even explaining. His silence pressed heavier than any defense could. It was the kind of silence that unsettles people, the kind that doesn't beg for mercy but promises consequence. The manager, arms folded across her chest, mistook it for defeat. "That's what I thought," she announced, her voice carrying like a gavel. When confronted, they go quiet. Fraud always shows itself. But some of the guests weren't convinced. Near the fountain, a young couple exchanged a glance. The woman whispered, "If he was guilty, wouldn't he be fighting back?" Her partner shrugged, uneasy. "Doesn't feel right." The junior clerk tapped the counter nervously, speaking louder than he needed to. "Ma'am, do you want me to cancel the suite in the system?" "Yes," the manager replied instantly. "Erase the booking. Wipe it out. He's done here. Erase. Wipe. Done." The words echoed like a ritual, an attempt not just to remove a man, but to erase his existence from this space. Still, he stood, breathing evenly, watching them write their own indictment with every word. One of the officers shifted uncomfortably, grip loosening for a second. He looked at the manager. "Are you sure about this? He hasn't resisted once." "Don't question me," she snapped. "Do your job." The officer's jaw tightened, but he obeyed. Yet his hesitation lingered in the air, another crack in the certainty the manager was trying to project. The man finally moved, not with force, but with intention. He adjusted his jacket where the fabric had bunched under the cuffs. A simple gesture. Yet it carried dignity, as if reminding everyone watching that he chose composure, not chaos. He had lived this moment before. At 29, turned away from a beachfront hotel despite holding a confirmed reservation, told the words, "We're fully booked." He had slept in his car that night, vowing never to let another lobby define his worth. Now, decades later, he wasn't the one being measured. The staff were. And his silence? It wasn't absence. It was strategy. The room could feel it. Guests leaned in, drawn not to the manager's loud commands, but to the man's quiet defiance. They didn't know who he was, not yet, but they knew enough. This wasn't submission. This was patience, waiting for the right moment to speak. And when he finally did, his words would cut sharper than any shout. The glow of a phone screen cut through the lobby light. Keith, a young guest in a hoodie and sneakers, had been sitting near the velvet couches, scrolling mindlessly. Now, his camera was raised. The red recording dot blinked like a pulse. "This doesn't look right," he muttered, loud enough for the nearest table to hear. The manager spun toward him. "Put that away. This is private business." Keith didn't lower it. "No, this is public. We're all standing here watching." Across the marble floor, another phone lifted. A tourist from Toronto, her suitcase still by her side, whispered into her mic. "I'm at the Horizon Hotel downtown, and they're escorting a guest out for—" "What? Asking for room service?" Her live stream comments exploded instantly, hearts, angry faces, disbelief. The officers stiffened. They weren't trained for viral. At the concierge desk, Elena, the youngest staff member on shift, had been silent until now. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, torn between orders and conscience. She glanced at the screen. The reservation was right there. Suite 1702. Verified. Her lips parted, but fear clamped them shut. The man in cuffs caught her eye. Just a glance. Steady, wordless. But it carried weight. "You know the truth." The silence broke with another witness. An older man in a navy blazer stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said, voice steady. "I've stayed here for 20 years. I've never seen a guest treated like this. What exactly is the offense?" The manager's smile faltered. "This is a fraud investigation." The man raised an eyebrow. "Over dinner?" Laughter rippled in the corner. Nervous, but cutting. More phones rose. A teenager muttered, "This is going on TikTok for sure." A mother held her daughter closer, but she whispered to her husband, "Record this. People need to see." The lobby no longer felt like a hotel. It felt like an arena. Every bystander had become jury. Every camera lens, a spotlight, and still, the central figure, the man being paraded as if guilty, remained calm, breathing steady, eyes forward, letting the room tilt not by force, but by witness. The manager snapped, voice sharp, desperate to reclaim control. "All of you, stop recording! This is a private establishment!" But Keith's voice cut back, louder now. "No, it's a public moment, and it's already live." The words dropped like a verdict. Guests gasped, murmurs swelled, and suddenly the manager's authority didn't echo anymore. It cracked. Because the truth was no longer locked in the hotel system. It was in the hands of everyone watching. The manager's voice rose, sharper now, slicing through the swell of whispers. "Enough," she barked. "This man is a fraud. He doesn't belong in this suite, or in this hotel. And if you all had any sense, you'd stop defending him." The words landed like a slap across marble. Gasps spread. Phones steadied higher, no longer shaky with hesitation, but firm with purpose. Her assistant, a clerk with a too-tight tie and too much eagerness, chimed in. "People like him pull this all the time. Fake names, fake cards, always looking for a free ride." His tone dripped with certainty, as if he'd seen this movie before and decided how it ended. Keith, still filming from the couch, muttered, "You didn't even check his ID." The clerk's eyes flicked over. "Stay out of this. He doesn't deserve the room. End of story." And with that, the divide was clear. It wasn't about one meal or one request. It was about erasure. The man in cuffs inhaled, calm and steady, like a stone anchoring a storm. He didn't interrupt. He let them pile words like bricks on their own cage. The manager stepped closer, almost triumphant in her cruelty. You should be grateful we're not calling the police. Yet. She looked him up and down, her smirk tightening. Frankly, you don't look like someone who belongs in a penthouse suite. You look misplaced. That word misplaced hung heavy. It wasn't about clothes or cards. It was about existence. A ripple of outrage spread. A woman with a stroller shook her head fiercely. That's disgusting, she said aloud. An older guest whispered, they'll regret this. Elena, still at the desk, pressed her palms flat on the counter. She could see the booking right there, glowing on the screen. Suite 1702, VIP clearance. Every fact contradicted the accusation. Her jaw clenched, but fear still chained her tongue. The clerk sensed the shift, doubled down. If we let people like him slip through, what happens next? Everyone's safety is at risk. Phones caught it. Every syllable, every prejudice disguised as policy. The man finally tilted his head, eyes calm but sharp, as if marking each word for later. He didn't need to argue. The room was already recording his defense for him. Keith muttered into his phone, "This isn't security, this is humiliation." His live stream chat blew up with comments. "Call a lawyer. This is racial profiling. Don't let them push him out." The manager snapped again, desperate to reassert power. "Get him out. Now!" But something had shifted. The crowd wasn't nodding along anymore. They were watching, waiting, documenting, and the silence that followed wasn't obedience. It was judgment. The manager's patience snapped like brittle glass. "Take his things," she ordered. The younger clerk obeyed instantly. He reached across the counter, snatched the folded receipt and the man's card, holding them up like stolen goods on display. "See? Probably fake," he sneered, before sliding both into a drawer with a loud metallic slam. Gasps rippled through the lobby. A woman near the fountain whispered, "That's theft." But the manager only straightened her blazer, her smirk widening. "You won't be getting those back until the police arrive, if they even decide you deserve them." The word police hit the air like a trigger. Guests shifted uneasily. A teenager muttered, "Over room service? Seriously?" Keith's live stream chat scrolled faster. "This is insane. He did nothing wrong. They're stealing from him." The officers tightened their hold, one pressing a palm against the man's shoulder. "You're not making this easier," he said quietly. But the man didn't react. His gaze stayed steady, eyes unblinking, as if cataloging every insult. Calm wasn't weakness. It was memory. He'd felt the same pressure years ago when an officer shoved him against a hood after mistaking him for a trespasser outside his own office building. That memory had cut deep, but it had also carved resolve. And tonight, history was repeating. Only this time, witnesses stood everywhere, their phones raised like mirrors. The manager leaned closer, lowering her voice, but not enough to hide her venom. "I told you don't belong here. Not in this suite, not in this lobby, not in this hotel." Her assistant added fuel, sneering loud enough for the guests to hear. "If he wants food, there's a diner down the street. That's more his level." Laughter thin, uneasy came from one side of the counter. Not all the staff laughed, but those who did revealed everything. The man adjusted his jacket again, the cuffs biting against his wrists. His silence wasn't empty. It was weight. It said, "I hear you, and you'll answer for it." Elena flinched, finally speaking up from behind the desk. "Ma'am," she whispered, "his booking." "Quiet," the manager snapped, "or you'll join him." The threat hung heavy. Elena's lips pressed shut, but her eyes told another story: anger, shame, conflict. Keith angled his phone higher. "They just said he doesn't belong here." Everyone heard that. He narrated to his stream. Comments flew. "That's racism. That's illegal. Don't let them silence him." The officers began moving him toward the doors. The metallic click of his card being locked away echoed behind them like a gavel. And still, he didn't resist. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He only walked with the weight of someone who knew exactly how this story would end, because he'd written the ending long before this night ever began. The cuffs dug into his wrists as the officers steered him toward the revolving doors. But instead of struggling, he shifted just enough to free one hand. Calmly, he lifted his phone. The lobby stilled. Cameras pointed. Whispers hushed. Even the officers slowed, sensing something had shifted. He pressed one button. The line clicked alive instantly. "Rachel," he said evenly, his voice steady as stone. A crisp female voice answered without delay, echoing faintly through speaker mode. "I'm here." Log this moment, he instructed. Lock the timestamp. Activate protocol. A pause, then her tone sharpened. Efficient. Precise. Confirmed. The board will be alerted within 60 seconds. Internal systems are syncing now. The manager scoffed, trying to laugh over the weight in his voice. Oh, please. You think calling your little friend is going to change anything? You're finished here. Oh, but her laugh faltered when Rachel's voice carried loud enough for the whole lobby. Identity confirmed. Suite 1702. Executive override level. Owner clearance. Security breach logged. Escalation in progress. Gasps spread like sparks through the crowd. Phones zoomed closer. Keith whispered to his stream, "Did you hear that? Owner clearance." The manager's face blanched, but she recovered fast, snapping, "Anyone can fake a voice on a phone. Shut that off." The man didn't. He let the call stay live, the voice of authority echoing across marble and glass. Rachel's tone cut again, razor sharp. "Do you require staff removal authorization now?" Not yet. His silence lingered for a beat. Then he answered with calm precision, "Stand by. Continue recording." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. One loosened his grip slightly, whispering, "Ma'am, are you sure?" "I said move him out," the manager barked, desperation bleeding through. But the weight had shifted. The crowd no longer believed her certainty. They believed the calm man in cuffs, the one who spoke not like a guest, but like someone used to commanding rooms much larger than this. He slid his phone back into his pocket, voice low but clear enough for every lens. "I gave you a chance to choose respect. You chose exposure instead." The lobby vibrated with murmurs. Elena at the desk whispered under her breath, "Oh my God." The man straightened his shoulders against the officer's hands. He wasn't resisting. He was waiting. Waiting for the exact moment to drop the truth so heavy it would crush every smirk in the room. And with Rachel's voice still live in his pocket, that moment was already on its way. The lobby's hum had turned into a low roar, murmurs, whispers, the faint buzz of live stream notifications. Every phone was pointed at the man in cuffs, every eye fixed on the scene. He stood still, composed, letting the silence stretch 1 second longer than comfort allowed. Then his voice cut through, deep and deliberate. "You want to know who I am?" The manager folded her arms, smirk curling back onto her face. "Yes, let's hear it. Who exactly do you think you are?" He lifted his chin, eyes locking on hers. "I am the founder and majority shareholder of this hotel chain. This lobby, these walls, this staff, every paycheck flows from my signature." The words detonated like glass shattering. Gasps erupted, a chorus of disbelief and vindication. Keith's live stream chat went wild. "He owns it. He owns the hotel." The officers froze mid-step. One stammered, "Wait, what?" Rachel's voice, still live from his pocket, chimed in like the strike of a gavel. "Confirmation. This is Mr. Carter, CEO and principal owner of Horizon Hotels International. Identity verified. Board of directors notified." Phones caught it. Every syllable. The truth was no longer his alone, it was archived across thousands of feeds in real time. The manager's face drained of color, but she tried one last deflection. Anyone could stage this. A stunt. A trick. The man cut her off. Steady. Sharp. "You tore up my booking. You locked my card away. You called me a fraud in a hotel I built. That is not a mistake. That is misconduct." The crowd erupted, some clapping, others shouting, "Exactly. We saw it. It's all recorded." Elena finally stepped out from behind the desk, trembling but resolute. "He's telling the truth," she said. "His name is right there in the system. Suite 1702, owner override." Her words sealed it. The silence that followed wasn't doubt, it was the collapse of the staff's last defense. The officers released their grip, stepping back slowly, as if realizing they'd nearly dragged their employer into the street. One muttered, "We're done here." The man adjusted his cuffs, not rushing, not gloating. His calm was sharper than any outburst. "You thought I was misplaced," he said, eyes locked on the manager. "But the only people out of place here are the ones who believe dignity is optional. You mistook silence for weakness. That was your last mistake." The lobby broke into applause, not loud, not chaotic, but steady, the kind that carried both relief and judgment. And in that moment, the power in the room shifted completely. The applause rolled through the marble lobby like thunder trapped in stone. Some guests clapped cautiously, others with both hands high, voices spilling over. "We saw it! We filmed everything!" The manager's smirk evaporated. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The color drained from her face until she looked less like a leader and more like a defendant waiting on a verdict. Her assistant, the eager clerk with the too-tight tie, stepped back from the counter as if the floor itself had turned hot. His earlier bravado, the words about people like him, hung in the air like poison, now undeniable, replayed on dozens of phones. "Delete that footage!" the manager snapped desperately at Keith. But Keith only turned his phone toward her, live stream still rolling. "Say that again," he challenged. The chat exploded. "We're watching. We're not deleting anything." Elena stood taller now, voice steady. "It's over. Everyone here knows the truth." The officers shifted awkwardly, no longer sure where to stand. One unclipped the cuffs, the metallic click echoing like a final judgment. He muttered under his breath, "Sir, I had no idea." The man, Mr. Carter, rubbed his wrist once, then let his hand fall to his side. His calm remained intact, heavier than ever. Across the lobby, a tourist turned her phone toward her own face, whispering to thousands watching live. "I'm in the Horizon Hotel in downtown. They just tried to throw out the man who owns the place. You can't make this up." Gasps and laughter mixed from the crowd. The story wasn't staying in this lobby. It was already breaking out into the digital world, unstoppable. The assistant clerk whispered to the manager, panic lacing his words. "What do we do?" She shot him a look, equal parts fury and terror. "Shut up." But nothing could be shut down now. Not the witnesses, not the evidence, not the weight of reality crashing over them like a wave. One guest near the bar raised his glass, calling out, "To justice!" A ripple of cheers followed, messy, spontaneous, but powerful. The staff behind the desk shifted uncomfortably, some already edging backward, as if distance might save them. It wouldn't. Mr. Carter's eyes swept the room, calm, steady, in control. He didn't need to shout. The collapse was already happening without him lifting a finger. And in that moment, every smirk, every sneer, every denial that had filled this lobby minutes ago dissolved into silence, shame, and the sinking realization. They had just humiliated the one man who could erase them all with a single command. The lobby had gone still, the weight of silence pressing heavier than marble columns. Every phone was raised, waiting, every eye locked on the man they had just tried to erase. Mr. Carter slipped his phone back into his palm. One tap. Rachel's voice returned, crisp, echoing from the speaker. "Standing by, sir." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Terminate their access," he said calmly, gaze fixed on the manager and her staff. "Effective immediately. Manager, assistant clerk, and anyone complicit. Lock them out of the system now." Rachel's answer was instant. "Processing." The manager shook her head, face pale. "You can't do this. Not here. Not like this." But her protest drowned under the sound of technology turning against her. A shrill beep cut from the computer terminal behind the desk. Her login screen flashed red. "Access denied." The clerk gasped, pulling his badge from his belt and swiping it desperately against the reader. Red again. Another denial. The system had rejected them. Cold and final. Phones zoomed in, catching every flicker of panic. Keith whispered into his stream, "It's happening. He just fired them on the spot." One of the officers took a step back, muttering, "Jesus." The manager slammed her fist against the counter, but nothing responded. Her digital authority had evaporated in seconds. She turned on him, desperation cracking her voice. "You can't just erase people." Mr. Carter's eyes narrowed. "You tried to erase me. Consider this balance." Gasps and cheers rippled through the crowd. A tourist clapped loudly. Someone shouted, "That's justice!" Rachel's voice chimed again from the phone, steady and merciless. "All 3 staff accounts disabled, credentials revoked, system logs preserved for legal audit." The clerk sagged against the counter, tie crooked, eyes wide. "This can't be real." "It's very real," Mr. Carter replied. His tone carried no heat, only weight, the kind of weight that ended careers. Elena, standing off to the side, exhaled shakily. Relief flickered across her face. For the first time all night, she looked like she could breathe. The guests erupted, some cheering, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Phones captured every angle, every second. The humiliation had flipped, but not through shouting or chaos, through precision. through power wielded quietly, surgically, and in that moment the verdict was clear. Those who tried to erase him were now the ones erased. For a moment, the lobby of the Horizon Hotel felt like the floor of a courtroom. The chandeliers still glowed, the fountain still whispered, but no one was fooled. The verdict had already been handed down. 3 staff members stood frozen, badges dead in their hands, authority stripped in front of every guest and every camera. The manager's face was drained of its practiced smirk. The clerk's hands shook as he tried again and again to swipe a badge that would never turn green. And in the center, standing where only minutes ago he had been cuffed and paraded like a criminal, Mr. Carter straightened his jacket. His calm presence filled the room more than any shouting ever could. The applause didn't stop. If anything, it built wave after wave, rolling across the lobby like a tide of judgment and relief. Guests raised their phones higher, documenting the collapse and the quiet power that replaced it. Finally, Carter lifted a hand, not to silence but to steady the room. The clapping softened into hush, anticipation pressing in. His voice landed low, certain, deliberate. "You called me a fraud in a hotel I own. You tried to strip me of dignity I built into these walls. Tonight, you showed the world what happens when prejudice wears a uniform and calls itself policy." The words sank deep, sharper than steel. The manager swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "We didn't know who you were." Carter's eyes narrowed. "That's the problem. You thought respect was earned by appearances, not by humanity. You mistook silence for weakness. That was your last mistake." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. A woman near the front whispered, "Say it again," as if needing the words burned into memory. Carter turned, not just to the disgraced staff, but to everyone watching, the guests, the cameras, the invisible thousands already streaming this moment around the world. "I don't need your service," he said. "I built it, and I will rebuild it with dignity, even if it means tearing down what arrogance tried to protect." Keith's live stream chat exploded. Goosebumps. This is justice. This is history. Carter stepped closer to the counter, resting one hand lightly on the marble as if reclaiming it. His gaze cut through the staff one by one. "You're finished here. Not because of me, but because of your own choices. Every insult, every sneer, every stolen second recorded, documented, undeniable. You wrote your own termination." Rachel's voice chimed again from his phone, calm and unflinching. "Incident logged, legal notified, media team on standby." The manager broke then, desperation spilling out. "Please, one more chance." But Carter didn't blink. His reply was ice wrapped in fire. "Mercy isn't owed where dignity was denied." A sharp intake of breath swept through the lobby. Some guests clapped again. Others whispered amen. He turned to Elena, the only staff member who had tried hesitantly but sincerely to speak truth. His expression softened just enough. "And you stood on the edge of silence but found the courage to step forward. Remember this, silence is complicity until it breaks." Her eyes watered, but she nodded firmly. Carter then pivoted back toward the crowd. "To everyone who recorded this, don't stop. The world needs to see what prejudice looks like when it thinks no one is watching, and the world needs to see what happens when dignity answers back." The room was electric now, humming with energy that felt larger than one lobby. He took one last breath, eyes sweeping the space where moments ago he had been humiliated. "I don't need to prove who I am. My existence is proof enough, and tonight every one of you saw it. I am not the victim of this story. I am the conclusion." Silence fell like a final curtain. Then the applause erupted again, louder, uncontainable, shaking the glass doors. Guests stood, clapping, some cheering, some crying. Phones streamed the moment across continents. The former manager backed away, face pale, lips quivering. The clerk slumped against the counter, defeated, and Carter walked past them, not rushed, not boastful, but steady. A man who had carried humiliation his entire life and turned it into fuel. As he reached the lobby doors, he paused. He didn't look back at the staff. He looked at the crowd, at the witnesses who had become part of something larger than themselves. "Dignity doesn't shout," he said quietly. "It simply endures, and it outlasts every attempt to erase it." With that, he stepped through the doors, the echo of his words lingering long after he was gone. And in that marble lobby, surrounded by witnesses and screens, one truth became undeniable. Justice doesn't always need to scream. Sometimes it only needs to stand tall.